and we are live. We're live on air. This is cool, and I can see that there are people logging on. Wow. Normally it takes time for people to log on, but we've got everyone on time today. We've got loads of people online. So this is great. So great turnout already. Normally it takes a little time, but I can see everyone's live on the air. I've got Dickon Bettinger, Dr. Bettinger, author Dr. Bettinger. as I know you've recently had your book out. So yeah, I normally if you're online, just we've got the webinar chat on the side. It's webinar jam chat. Say hello. Greg, hi. Phil, hi. Graham, hi. Fiona, hi. Sarah, hi. We've got loads of people already engaged. This is fantastic, Dickon. It's
that's great. That's great.
So just move my mic out of shot. So we'll just give everyone, normally I give everyone another minute or so to log on, but I'm really excited to have you here for our coaching group. It's, I think, the first time that we've had you on here. I know I've interviewed you several times, I think, now for various different things, and obviously we know each other, but yeah, it's great. Greg saying that he likes the mic. I was trying to subtly move that, out of shot, but obviously
that is one heck of a mic, let me tell you.
Yeah. Well, this was actually a gift from my brother, and I didn't know what to do with it really. And then when I started doing these webinars, it's actually come in quite handy. And if nothing else, at least gives the impression that I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we've got loads more people saying hello. So Birdie, hi. Tally, hi. Steph, hi. Arthur, Maria, Niels.
Great. Wow.
So
I recognize names. Fabulous.
So the working title we've got today, Dickon, is how to really impact your clients. And I thought this could be a really cool webinar, really cool discussion, conversation, because that's what we've been discussing recently. So we've had a couple of conversations recently about that. And what I really liked talking to you is that you're someone who's done a lot of work with lots and lots of different kinds of clients. I'm not going to kind of steal, your full bio, but you've got a lot of experience, you've got a lot of background, but also, you really kind of are very solid in where you're coming from. And I know I've experienced it both as someone who's been on kind of an immersion event with you, as a one-on-one client with you, and just interacting with you a few times. I've had the experience of that on the receiving end, and also through some of the work we've done together, I've kind of taken on board some of the things you've shared and shared it with my own clients to really massive impact. And it's quite different to perhaps what other people are saying out there. So I thought this could be a really cool conversation that we could have. In case there are people listening to this who have been living on Mars and don't know who you are, don't know your background in terms of the coaching world and in terms of just working with businesses, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I started working as a high school English teacher, and I learned everything I need to learn about connecting with people as a teacher of high school kids. And pretty soon, my favorite group of high school kids were the kids that nobody else could deal with. And if you can't learn how to get a good rapport or connection with those kids, you're not going to be able to get through to them. So that was a real incredible training ground and opportunity for me to learn a lot about what it means to really meet someone as an equal. So I'll talk more about that in a bit. But then I had so many kids coming to talk to me about their problems. I wanted to continue to learn whatever I could learn that I could share with them that would help them have an easier time of life. So then I went back to school and found an education department where I could get my doctorate and be trained as a psychologist, but in the education department rather than in the psychology department. And the view in education was nobody is sick. People just are, everybody is a learner. And when people are having difficulty, they just haven't learned what they need to learn in order to do better. So that's when I started really getting interested in what kind of insights can people have that will improve the quality of their life. And that set me up good for the work that I do. And then I worked 10 years in Vermont as a psychologist. And then I came across the three principles in 1986. And then I opened a center in Vermont that taught the three principles. For those of you who might not know about the three principles, they're fundamental principles behind the psychological functioning of every single human being. So all human beings have a mind, all human beings have the ability to be aware of life, which is consciousness, and all human beings think. It's that simple. And what I began to discover is as people have insights into what's most fundamentally true of everyone, their overall level of well-being goes up. And that's what I've always been interested in. As a psychologist, I was interested in mental health rather than mental illness. Studied from people that were pioneering in the field, Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, people who saw people as being really healthy people and how to bring out the health in each other. And then I moved to Pransky & Associates in LaConner, Washington, and was senior staff there for 16 years. And then about almost 5 years ago, I opened my own practice called Three Principles Mentoring. And now I do seminars all around the world. Oh, and Ankush, as you mentioned, I got my experience in working with large companies and doing executive coaching when I was at Pransky & Associates. So I taught the principles in a business context for 16 years.
And what, you know, actually, I don't know, but I'm guessing I think that you work with all sorts of clients. You know, is that true? And you've kind of done coaching / mentoring with a really wide variety.
I've always worked with a wide range of clients, wide economic background, socioeconomic backgrounds, all different cultures, all different ages. I've worked with kids as young as 4.5. I've worked with older kids as old as 94. My favorite older kids. And I've done couples therapy. That's what I've loved about the principles is they speak. There's no one they don't speak to, and can help.
So basically what I'm trying to point out is that, you know, this isn't an intellectual thing. You've walked the talk. You've had the experience of working with everyone from young kids to CEOs, from any background.
Men in prison. That was fun. And people in communities, drugs and alcohol.
The thing about the thing about this webinar that I really want to bring out then is, okay, so you've worked in all of these communities, you've done all of this work, and the thing is as well, you've been really, really impactful. So this is not something that you've kind of gone in and like, oh, let me try and talk about something. You've got a very strong following and people who I know who talk about you and just how impactful you are. And, you know, my own coach, Steve Chandler, who shares, you know, videos and resources from you, talks about you very highly. What is it that you find makes that impact with clients? You know, what do you put that down to for yourself?
I don't have clients. I don't see people as clients. I see people as people. Whether I'm working in a business context or in a school, I don't see students, I see people. And I see what's fundamentally true about each person, right? Everybody has a heart. And when I get out of my head into my heart and talk to another person's heart, we're equals. Absolute equals. And so I think one of the most important ways to have impact is to stop seeing customers and clients and students and kids and men and women, and you see a beautiful fellow human being sitting there just like you, full of potential, completely capable of having new thinking. And the only thing that is required for someone to change is new thinking. So I think that's one thing I wanted to talk about that I think is very important, and is that we see beyond the differences to ways in which we're similar. That we see the person sitting across from us as an equal, rather than we're the expert and they have something to learn from us. I learn so much from my students. It's unbelievable, from the people that I'm talking to or in a conversation with. Right? The person I'm talking to is as capable of having insight as I am.
You know, I get the impression, and we know each other a little bit, so I know that, you know, this isn't just a nice idea. So someone could be listening to this and go, okay, yeah, that's great, Dickon, now tell me what you really do, right? Like, come on, you know, I'm sitting across from a CEO, he's got something to say. You really see that. Like, you really, I feel it from you. This is more than just a good idea. Could you talk a little bit about how you got there? You know, there might be people listening to this who are coaches who are like, that sounds beautiful, that's wonderful, I don't see that. And they might want to. What can they do? How can they do that? What was your process? What happened for you?
Many years ago, we used to talk about the most important variable in a relationship is the health of the helper. And very little was focused on our own personal well-being. My daughter did her master's dissertation on the health of the helper. She did a review of the literature and couldn't find anything. Right? So as we learn things that help us become healthier, what that means to me in a very simple way, what that means to me is that you're much more, you have a lot less thinking on your mind, for one thing. I'm going to give you a list of some things to consider or reflect on. You have a lot less thinking on your mind, so it's important for us to take a look at what we bring to any relationship. The most important thing we can bring is our presence. Very often when people show up in a helping relationship or a coaching relationship, they have so much thinking on their mind about what it means to be a coach and how to help people, and thinking about what you're going to do, what you're going to say, what the other person is saying. And if our mind is filled with all kinds of personal thinking, we're not really present to the other person. And they can tell. They can tell. You can see somebody walking down the street toward you, and you can tell you the degree of presence they have. It's really easy for us to tell presence. We're so tuned in to the degree of presence a person has who's sitting with us. Right? So you get Another way of saying this is that you get more and more comfortable being in the now. And that has impact on people, because that's really what presence is the now is when you're fully aware in the moment without the interference and influence of your own personal thinking. That's what the now is. When people fall into the now, they just fall out of their personal thinking, their ideas, their concepts, their beliefs, and they just show up. They just show up, and it doesn't matter if it's presence is the most important variable, because that's what builds a foundation for getting rapport with someone. It's hard to get close to somebody or trust somebody or feel safe with somebody if they live in their own personal thinking. That's really another way of defining what ego is. Right? So if we're an ego showing up to help somebody else's ego, we don't have very much impact. If we begin to wake up to and fall out of our own personal thinking, we can really show up, and there's presence. We're in the now. And what this may sound so absolutely simple, Ankush, but when we're in our thinking, there's a certain vibe or feeling we're putting out that people respond to. Dogs, animals, little kids, and adults respond to the feeling of presence. And the feeling of presence is the feeling that's there naturally in human beings of being at ease and being comfortable when we're not caught up in our own personal thinking. So you begin to see the state of mind that you bring to your conversations with people has an impact as soon as you open the door. As soon as you see the other person, they already can sense your state of mind and are responding to it. So, presence allows the other person to feel safe. When we're with someone who is not in their ego and they're comfortable in their own skin, we relax. We relax our defenses. We relax our own insecure thinking. And when a client or any person begins to have less thinking on their mind, they're open learners. They can't help but to learn something. They can't help but to get new thinking. They can't help but to start to feel better in your presence. You know, there's certain friends of ours we just love being with, because as soon as we're in their presence, we relax. There's other people, as soon as we're in their presence, we get uptight. We're responding to their presence. I can't underestimate the importance of our own well-being in terms of how much impact we're going to have with a client, how comfortable they feel with us. Here's an example I think people can relate to. Have you ever gone to buy a car and you're almost afraid to step out of your car at the car lot when you start looking at cars, because you know all of a sudden the doors of the building and some salesman is going to come out and come over to you? And you can take one look at the person. As soon as you see them walking toward them, you know whether you're going to feel comfortable with them or whether already you've got an uncomfortable vibe. It's that evident. And you can't fake it. You can't fake it. Now, I had to learn that if I had less on my mind, there were all kinds of benefits. I could really meet the other person where they are. I could really listen to them in a different, deeper way. What does it mean to listen deeply to someone? When you have less thinking on your mind, you can hear what they're trying to say to you rather than what they're saying. So you can respond to a person on a much deeper level. You can really hear what someone's trying to say. You can hear deeper than their words. Like my wife used to say, Dickon, you're not listening to me. And I had so much thinking on my mind. I was so preoccupied, and I said, yes, I am. I can repeat every word you said. And she said, you don't get it. You're not listening. And I said, listen, I've taken all the courses. I know what I'm doing. I call it deep listening because not only do you hear beyond the other person's words, but you hear beyond your own words. In other words, your mind becomes more open and receptive to your own innate wisdom. You get things occur to you to say that are fresh and alive and responsive. And that's where impact comes from. It comes from where our words come from. It doesn't come from the words themselves. You can have two people saying the same thing to a person, and one has impact and one doesn't. And they both just said the same thing. They both said exactly the same thing, but they've said it from a different state of mind, a different feeling, a different degree of presence. So another way of saying this, one of my favorite teachers was Linda Pransky. She was one of the best listeners I'd ever come across. But not only did she listen deeply to her clients and what they were trying to say, but she had total trust in whatever occurred to her from that quiet place deep within herself was exactly the best thing she could say to the person. Wisdom knows how to draw on what you know, so you don't have to be trying to remember what you know. I think trying to remember what to say to somebody or how to say it or when to say it, that kind of sharing from your own head doesn't have much impact on people. There's a lot of different places I can go from here, Ankush. Any thoughts at this point? I can talk more deeply about any one of these. I can expand on this. I can get really spiritual. I can get really practical.
Well, I'm just thinking that I can see how, and I think it's fairly self-evident. There's some great examples there of if someone's more present, if someone listens more deeply, if someone's more grounded, more in the now, and there are lots of words we can use to describe that, they're going to be more impactful. And that comes across really, really clearly. Now, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of people listening to this, and someone might be listening going, that's great. So how do I do that? How do I get more of that space? How do I get more grounded? How do I get more present? I'm trying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I couldn't do it until I learned the principles. So I'm biased. I think that's the most direct way to having less on your mind. That is, people begin to realize that you live in the experience of your own thinking. You begin to see how much thinking you're doing that's not helpful. After my first training in the principles, I came back to sit with my clients, and I was absolutely shocked by how much thinking I was doing that created a feeling of sort of preoccupation or distraction. I wasn't really listening to my clients. I was listening to this ongoing voice in my head that never stopped talking. It shocked me, Ankush. I wasn't listening. I finally saw that you can't be caught up in your own thinking and listening at the same time. And I was always caught up in my own thinking. People would be talking to me and I'd already be thinking about what they were saying or what I was going to say. How can we have impact when we're not really present to the person, when we're only present to our own personal thinking? Right? I began to have less and less thinking on my mind when I began to learn about what Sid Banks called pure consciousness, which is the space underneath your personal thought system that's always silent. It's awareness before it gets mixed up in with our personal thinking. It's pure presence. And that I began to get more familiar with what it was to fall into that space. And it was uncomfortable for me at first, because when you fall into that space, you're falling into the unknown. And the unknown literally is that. You don't know anything. You don't know what to say to this person. You don't know what you're going to say next. You don't know how to respond to somebody. But the paradox is, it's only when we step into the unknown that we get deeper knowing in terms of how to respond to people in a helpful way.
Can I share what that looked like for me, or what my process was? Because I think it might be helpful, keeping in mind, these are coaches, these are people who want to do this for a living and want to do this professionally. The biggest thing that made an impact for me in terms of, pointing to the three principles was really to go and hire someone. And I know the first person for me, first of all, it was doing a group training. And then I worked with Keith, Dr. Keith Blevins. That was really impactful for me. It made such a big difference. And then I did some retreats. I did one with Elsie, one with you, Dickon. And again, every time I spent time with someone who had an understanding of this, like a deep experiential understanding of this, it made a difference for me. I spent nearly a year having conversations with Chip. Very, very different, but again, coming from Chip Chipman, coming from that experience, or speaking to someone who had that experience, made a huge difference for me. And again, recently we've had a couple of conversations that completely changed the way I did my training event that I did a couple of weeks ago. Through this is not, for me, the difference was, it's not about what you're saying, because I'll just speak for me. I could see that. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But in a practical level, what shifted was having time with someone who is in that grounded space, who lives in the now more than I do. And just kind of feeling that. And I feel it even in this conversation that I've slowed down a bit. And so for anyone listening, I don't know if you have a different view on this, Dickon, but for me, anyone listening, I think, again, if you're going to do this professionally, it really helps to hire someone like Dickon or Dr. Blevins or Chip Chipman or someone like that. Or if you don't want to invest that much, or go there's so many ways to get experiences of some of these teachers now. We're living in a wonderful time, and as much as I do that, the more that I get, the more I shift. So I'm a lot slower than I was a few years ago, and I'm sure in a few years I'll be even slower in here.
My teacher, Sydney Banks, we would ask him, how do you get training in this? He said, all you need is one tape. Take one of my tapes and listen to it over and over again. And I guarantee you'll hear something. If human beings listen to anything with a quiet mind, they start having insight. So you want to listen deeply and quietly to someone who's pointing you towards something that's very profound and very true. Right? So there's, as you're saying, Ankush, there's a lot of good teachers, and teachers, it is a lot easier to get a sense of what we're talking about by talking to someone. There's no question. Or you can do it by listening to a tape, or you can do it by talking to someone in person. One of the things, impact is a function of people going beyond their intellect. When people's personal thinking quiets down, universally, people start to feel better and start to get new thinking that's helpful. It's that simple. If you really want to have impact, you've got to find a way to get out of beyond your intellect so that you can meet someone from a more heart space, from a more loving feeling, from a more warm presence that's comfortable in this silence, comfortable in this unknown. And you're inviting people to join you in that space and discover that space, because any human being on this planet, as their personal thinking quiets down, not only do they feel better, but that's where people have insight and can solve problems and can respond better, discover their own solutions, find their own common sense thoughts that occur to you that go, oh, okay, I guess I can do this. Oh, I guess this makes sense. So the fact of the matter is, I don't have to help people. I point people in the direction where they'll get all the help they need. And it's going to come from inside of them. It's going to come from their own quiet.
I really want to open this up to questions from the group, because it's a webinar, and I'm sure we could talk for another hour or so and keep going with this, and I'm loving it. Cajun's asking, is this recorded? Yes, it is. So if you're watching this live, get uploaded to my 3 Principles Coaching YouTube channel so you can watch it back again. Isabel's asked, how do you switch off the inner dialogue?
Not by trying. The people's biggest thing is that they try to switch it off. When any human being is really fully present and wide open, in that moment, they are not giving their attention to anything they're thinking. They're wide open. When people are wide open, their thinking will quiet down on its own. If you start thinking about quieting your mind down or trying to do it, you're right back in your personal thinking, and you can't think your way to a quiet mind. No one can. No one can. I don't try and quiet my mind down. When I'm aware of how much thinking I'm doing, I tend to back off from my thinking. And then when I back off from my thinking, there's no trying, there's no effort. It's a little bit like when you go to the beach and you lay down in the sun on the sand on your towel, you are not trying to quiet your mind down. If you did, you'd have a horrible time at the beach. You'd be thinking about your thinking. You'd be thinking about yourself. You'd be thinking about whether your mind is quiet or not, rather than just laying there, relaxed, open. And at some point, your mind quiets down. That's why people go on vacation.
Mm. Right, and then there's people that go on vacation, and I've done this where you go on vacation, or you're looking forward to it, and you're thinking about it. 2 weeks to go, 1 week to go, leading up to it, and then when you're there, you're like, oh, the first day's gone already. Oh, I've only got a day left. I've got to go back to work. And it's not. I've done that in the past before I got introduced to these principles, where I never really got to enjoy that time off. And yet now it's like I can have that feeling whenever.
Well, we do. All of us can learn how to be natural again, because it is natural. It's not something you can do. We're born, the first 5 years of our life practically, we're just resting in the now, and thoughts are coming and going freely, and we're not all caught up in our thinking. Right? It's our natural state. It's the most natural state in the world. And gradually we get more and more involved with our ideas, and we get enamored with our ideas. Right? So we get caught up in our own conditioned mind. And then someone like Sid Banks comes along and says, you're going to feel every thought you have and every thought you're caught up in, and you begin to realize that a lot of the thinking you're doing is not necessarily helpful to you. It's just creating tension or stress or discomfort or insecurity. So you begin to ignore that thinking, and when you ignore that thinking, you're back in the now. I had a thought the other day, Kush, that I laughed for about 3 days with. It was like, what if when I wanted to, I could just flip a little switch on the side of my head and my thinking would go from English to Chinese? That'd be the fastest way to just ignore it, because I wouldn't understand any of it. I wouldn't know what anything meant, so I wouldn't pay attention to it. And it would just be a little background buzz that would come and go. A little Chinese person speaking to me in the background that I couldn't understand. Right? Now, that's what it's like for me now. I get so bored with listening to myself. It's just, most of it's pretty pathetic. Oh, I should do this, I should do that. Oh, this means this means that. This is who I am. This is who you are. This is what's happening. This is what I have to do. Blah, 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 blah. It's really, most of it is pretty pathetic, right? Sometimes it's inspired, then it's great. Pay attention to it and see what it has to say. Great. But the vast majority of our thinking is uninspired and not helpful. So as people get healthier, they change from having a personal relationship with their own thinking to having an impersonal relationship to their own thinking. And that's as practical as it gets. When I learned I could be with people that had come to see me and not pay attention to my own thinking and just be present and then see what occurred to me and share that or say that, my work became more enjoyable, it became easier, and I began to have more impact.
Well, I can see it gives us perspective, as coaches, right? Like, the only thing that holds us back is our own thinking.
Yeah, ever.
And so what I hear from what you're saying is that you give yourself that perspective from your own thinking, and in doing so, you help your client to get perspective from their own thinking, because that's what's stopping them or holding them back.
That's right. I like people to have the experience of what happens when we're not paying attention to our own thinking. I like people to have an experience of that, and then they begin to intuit that there's something that lies beyond their intellect, that's wise and knowing and is filled with deeper feelings that connect us to life. You know, it's easy sometimes when I'm working with someone who's, say, really involved in sports, because they've had the experience of being in the now, where they don't pay attention to anything they're thinking, or they'd be in all kinds of trouble. It's just becoming more familiar and comfortable with that space and knowing that that's where the magic happens. Right? Most people don't know that that's where the magic happens, so they don't even look there.
Greg's asked a question, and he said, if I were to start working with you, Dickon, what would that look like in the beginning? And I think that's quite interesting because, you know, from a practical point of view, when you work with people, like you say, you're pointing them to this inner space. You're helping them see that a quiet mind is where they have real impact. What does that look like? You don't just sit in silence, or you don't just say go and listen to a Sid Banks audio.
First of all, I never know what's going to occur to me other than right now. So I have no idea what would occur to me. But let me answer it a different way, Greg, because that's the honest truth. I would have no idea what I would say to you. I have a great faith that if I sit down with somebody and I look at that person and they look at me, that something will occur either to them or to me to say. And if it occurs to me before it occurs to them, I say what occurs to me. Like I might say, "Hi, Greg. It's really nice to meet you. I'm glad you've come along." And then you may or may not say anything. And if you say something, I'll respond to it. And if you don't say something, I'd go, "Well, what are you hoping for anything by coming here? Is there anything I can help you with? Or is there anything you're interested in? Or what brought you here?" And I'd be curious. I just get curious. It's just ordinary. It's just ordinary. Now, I have to tell you, this is how I am with CEOs of big companies. "Hi, how you doing?" "Is that a picture of your kids? Wow, they're great looking kids. Are they in college? Are they? Wow, where are they going? Yeah, how do they like it? Good, good. Well, tell me about your work. I'd love to hear about what you do. Do you enjoy what you do? Do you like it? What gets you up in the morning? What's your vision? What you really want to get out of life? Not just out of this job, but out of life. What are you looking for? I'm curious." I just love being curious with people. So you meet people, you get curious, you ask them questions, and they respond, and then I get quiet and see what occurs to me to respond back. And at some point, it might occur to me to share, "Hey, I've learned something that helps me have less on my mind. You have a lot on your mind. Can I share that with you and we can talk about it?" It's just ordinary. It's just ordinary. It's just ordinary. Another way I think about it, I was very, 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 very successful with engaging heads of companies and having them want me to come do more work with them. And I never tried to make that happen. I saw my job as great. I get to call people up and talk to them and make friends with them. And if I made friends with a business executive or with a high school kid who's hates the world, or a mother who's struggling with her new child, if I make friends with them, it makes sense that after really listening and really getting rapport and really get connected, to hear what they're interested in and to share what I know that might be of help to them. And then see if it's helpful. Now, I know that it's only helpful if they get new thinking about it. So I'm very, very interested in helping people relax and enjoy themselves and feel comfortable, because I know when people are relaxed and enjoying themselves, they can't help but have insights. When I was teaching, I could take kids who hated high school, and if I got rapport with them and we were having fun, and then I shared with them some stuff, they couldn't help but to learn, and they would enjoy it, and they would be surprised that they would enjoy it, and they would do well. So I didn't have troublemakers in my class like everybody else, because I would get present, be in a good feeling, have fun, and then see what occurred. Then you get to be the same person with anybody you meet. I'm no different with you, Kush, than I am with my wife or my kids or just meet, get present, see what occurs, enjoy yourself, look in that direction, see what new occurs to you, and celebrate it.
It sounds incredibly simple. And do you feel that 3 Principles coaches at the moment get that simplicity, or are we overcomplicating it for ourselves?
We always overcomplicate. I guarantee you're overcomplicating it. There's always simpler. And we're not accustomed to looking in the direction of simplicity. Right? The Principles brought a simplicity to me. I'm living in the world of thought. So I have free will. So what thinking I hold on to and what thinking I let go of is completely up to me. And as I'm just discover, when I let go of more than 90% of useless thinking I do, I don't lose anything of value. I get dumber. And when I'm dumber, I know more. I can be more helpful to people because things occur to me fresh and creative and spontaneously. I think most coaches have to get a lot dumber before they're going to have more impact. To stop thinking you should know and that you're the expert and you need to know, and you begin to have more trust and faith in people's wisdom, your own and other people's wisdom, which in a very practical way is when you have less on your mind, more things occur to you that are fresh and alive and spontaneous, and they're helpful, and that's where impact comes from. Helping people touch that space within themselves where new thought arises spontaneously and freshly, where deeper feelings arise spontaneously and freshly, and give us a greater connection to the world.
We've got about 10 minutes left, and if anyone's got any other questions, I'm sure everyone's as hooked into what you're saying as I am, but if anyone's got any other questions, then please do use this opportunity to type into the message box on the side, and make the most of this opportunity with Dicken. You and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, and coming back to this whole thing, coming back to this whole thing of simplicity, I did a 4-day workshop, and what happened after we spoke was really I cut down. I used to do 3-day workshops, and the content was getting progressively less each time I did it. And after we spoke, it kind of cut down even more. And I was like, I honestly went in like a little nervous, going, "Okay, Dicken, I'm gonna trust this."
I know.
But what am I going to talk about for 4 days? And it was incredible. Like we ran out of time, you know, like we could have kept on going further. And you used to do at Pransky and Associates, you know, training over several days. And did you still keep it this simple?
Well, I do a lot of 4-day immersions with people who come to spend those 4 days together here. And I'm thrilled that we can be done by the end of day 1 or halfway through day 2. And then we get to just hang out together and see what fresh and alive shows up. And people begin to discover what it's like to live a natural, spontaneous, present-centered, lively, vital life. And they get to experience the ordinariness of that and the power of that and the simplicity of that. And that's what everybody is looking for anyways. People.
Sorry to interject. So we're getting a few questions coming in. I want to get to them before we run out of time.
Yeah, good. I love the questions.
So Phil's asking, said, sounds so much like Zen or Taoism. Knowing your background, can you speak to this?
Well, this starts sounding like everything that points toward either psychological or spiritual well-being. Because there's something fundamentally true. I think what Sid Banks brought to the equation that went beyond what I had learned in Buddhism and Zen and that understanding was the role thought plays in creating 100% of our experience. And the beauty of that and the simplicity of that, and that our feeling indicates the quality of thinking we're involved in. So when I feel tension now, I stop paying attention to what I'm thinking. And it used to be I'd do the exact opposite. When I would feel tension or upset, I'd pay twice as much attention to what I'm thinking, and it would seem twice as true. And I would even say, now I know what I really think. Now I know what I really feel. And then along comes little Sid Banks with his 9th grade education, and he says, the ego gets it backwards all the time. And boy, that's so true. That's so true. It's the opposite of what I had thought. Right? So now when I feel tension or stress, I ignore, pay no attention to what I'm thinking. And that's one of the indicators of mental health is people who pay attention to their low quality thought and think it's true. That's how Sid Banks defined mental illness. That's the only thing defining mental illness. You bring me anybody who has psychological difficulty, and if they learn not to take their own thinking to be true, that alone would allow them to live a healthy life. That alone. Whether it's depression or bipolar or schizophrenia or hallucinations or whatever it is, it's still just thought taken seriously. It's still a story we're spinning and then thinking is true. So as you begin to understand just a little bit about thought, you begin to be more particular in terms of what thinking you pay attention to. That helps us in such a simple, profound way. And then you'll just see how when clients are having difficulty, the real problem is they're caught up in their thinking and think it's true. That's the real problem. No matter what they say the problem is, that's really the problem. But for that thinking, they'd have clarity and inspiration and creativity and perspective and all kinds of common sense and all kinds of hope and enthusiasm that was boundless. And you know it's all in there just waiting to come out. It's just covered over by the thinking they're caught up in and thinking is true. It's that simple.
Yeah. And I think that really brings us to impact. You know, I think people can listen to you and say, well, it's okay for Dickon. He's got the experience. He's got the confidence. He's got everything else. But you know what's really helped me is to see, like you say, it is just such a simple thing. If it wasn't for the person believing they're thinking, it's a misunderstanding problem, regardless of what shows up. And once we know it's that, it's very, very simple to be extremely impactful with people.
Yeah.
I've got another quick question I want to squeeze in before we finish, and very practical question from Fiona. Do you ever formally contract with people about how you will work with them in a series of coaching sessions?
The closest I've ever come to a formal contract is I'll write down, together we'll explore what they might be interested in learning. And we'll make a list of that and write it down. And at the end of our work together, I'll come back to it and see whether they feel like they've learned things that would help them with each of the things on their list. But there's only one problem with that. To me, those are learning opportunities. They're not goals. Because the real learning that happens is what occurs to people that they hadn't even thought of or didn't even know they needed to learn or wanted to learn. So people say, yeah, I learned things that will help me with the things I came in with, but I learned things that I had no idea I even wanted to learn or needed to learn, and they're way better. That's way better than what was on my list. Because you can't know what wisdom is going to bring you. You can't know what it'll bring you tomorrow. I can't know. They can't know. But we can both have faith that that's going to happen. Right? But the closest I come to a formal contract is sometimes, and not always, depends on the person and what they're looking for, but sometimes I'll have a list of 5 or 6 things they're really keen on learning, right? And as an educator, I don't mind having learning objectives, and I don't mind helping people discover the common sense and wisdom they need to answer their own questions so that they feel satisfied, that they have more confidence with those questions, or they found their own answers to those questions. That often happens in the first day and a half. Then we can just explore what wisdom has to offer that's beyond what they thought they were looking for. Then it really gets fun. Then it's really impactful. Whoa. Then the limits are off.
I cannot believe we have run out of time. This has just flown by. We could have easily gone for 2 or 3 times the amount of time we had allocated. Thank you so much for that. I found that incredibly impactful myself. It was a good reminder of things that you've been pointing me to already. If people want to know more, or they want to hear more from you, how can they do that?
You can go to my website, and I have on there a list of a lot of talks that I've given that I feel like came from an inspired place. So people might enjoy listening to those. I have my new book out. It's called Coming Home. I'm hoping by tomorrow Amazon itself will list it rather than the independent booksellers that jump on it and list it before it's even finally put out there by Amazon. But it should be listed tomorrow at the latest. It should be at a reasonable price, and you can get it there. In the U.S., it's been available for a week already on Amazon. So I feel really good about the book. My friend Natasha and I worked on it for 2 years, and it's finally ready for publication. Got my little.
Fantastic. And I know you do lots of trainings. You do stuff in England. You're doing stuff in Europe. You're doing stuff in the US. So I encourage people.
Coming to England. Coming to England. I'm going to be there at the conference, and then in Devon the next weekend, and then the weekend after that up in the Lake District, and then back down to Dickens Centre in London.
So I encourage people, if you can get to one of those, do so. It's great to spend time with Dickon. You can really benefit from hiring Dickon, getting contact with him via his website. Really glad to have you here. If anybody wants to learn more about coaching, please reach out to me as well. I'm happy to help 3 Principles coaches. I love what we're doing here. I love how the group's developing. I love these webinars. Thank you so much, Dickon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we'll have another one soon.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ankush. Really, thank you. It's been great.